Supervisors to order, please. We will start by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. That will be followed by a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kidney failure.
Thank you. I'd like to have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned organizational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, October 26th at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request everyone, please put your phones and or other electronic devices on silent as to not to interrupt the meeting, and I thank you for your cooperation. And we will proceed to roll call, and I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Arstead.
Here. Bowman.
Beestrom.
Here.
Bizotto. Boots. Butke.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Seiler.
Here.
Conway.
Here.
Dickinson.
Here.
Drabeck. Byfrick. Fisher.
Here.
Gaber.
Here.
Gibbs. Gonering.
Here.
Guild.
Here.
Gums.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Jacobson. Johnson. Krause. Lamont.
Here.
Leahy.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Mask.
Here.
McEwen.
Here.
Oberbeck.
Here.
Opal. Robinson. Rosenberg. Seafelt. Van Cray. Here. Zhang.
Here.
Bizotto.
Information on the lighting of the Harris County.
Boots. Drabeck.
Here. Can you hear me?
Byfrick. Thank you, I heard you that time. Byfrick.
Okay.
Seafelt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, I just joined the meeting. This is Supervisor Boots.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, along with our viewing audience. And so we will proceed to consent agenda item C8 through item C13B1. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Butke and seconded by Supervisor Dickinson. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda items C8 through items C13B1, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. And we will move on to memorial, item D, life and public service of Arnold Schleich. I'd ask the clerk to read the memorial, please.
Arnie Schleich, 73, passed away on Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. He was born to Albert and Esther Schleich and grew up in eastern Marathon County. Arnie attended D.C. Everest High School, graduating in 1966. It was there that he met his wife, Pat, and they were married for 52 years. Pat survives along with sons Chad and Scott, daughters-in-law Bobby and Amy, grandchildren August, Violet, Sophie, and Zachary, siblings, nieces, nephews, and friends. Arnie was a member of the Army Reserves, receiving an honorable discharge as a staff sergeant. In addition to founding a construction company and operating his family veal farm, he served his community in numerous ways. The town of Easton was fortunate to have Arnie as a building inspector for 2 years, town supervisor for 6 years, and town chairman for 28 years. He also served on the Wisconsin Towns Association as an officer and as president. He was also director of Wisconsin County Forest Association. He shared his knowledge of and love for the outdoors with future generations by teaching at the D.C. Everest School Forest. Arnie was elected to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors in 2010, representing District 14 and then District 12. During his tenure on the board, he served on the Human Resources Committee, Forestry and Recreation Committee, Infrastructure Committee, Environmental Resources Committee, Public Safety Committee, Board of Adjustment, and Metallic Mining Committee. He was a lifelong member of Zion Lutheran Church in Anawa. He enjoyed playing cards with friends and especially loved the company of his family. Even in death, he served others as an organ and tissue donor. In the passing of Arnie Schleich, we have lost a leader who was dedicated to serving his community in numerous ways. He is hereby honored and remembered for his faithful public service. Now therefore be it resolved by the Marathon County Board of Supervisors that they enter this memorial into the proceedings of the board out of respect for the memory of Arnold Arnie Schleich. A copy of this memorial shall be sent to his family with the sympathies of the board.
You've heard the memorial. What is your pleasure? Motion by
Supervisor
Supervisor
Mask.
Christensen. Second by whom?
Supervisor
Supervisor
Mask.
Mask with a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the memorial of the life and public service of Arnold Schleich signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Out of respect and memorial, we will have a moment of silence and observance. Thank you. Moving on to ordinances, item E18, amending section 7.125 of the Marathon County relating to the designation of ATV and UTV routes and trails and regulations of the ATV and UTV operations within Marathon County. Ordinance 39-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Christensen and second by Supervisor Opel. Any discussion? Supervisor Opel.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess I broke it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has this been through the Public Safety Committee at all?
This is not. This is coming directly from infrastructure.
Well, I would like to see it go to the Public Safety Committee, so I would, I don't know whether I amend it or make a motion to move it there.
It would be a motion to refer.
Then I make that motion to refer.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Krause, to refer to the Public Safety Committee. Any discussion on that motion? Supervisor Gums.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of the Infrastructure Committee, I'd like to say a word or two. I'm going to quote out of our Wisconsin Counties magazine here we got just this week. It's a profile of Josh Schumann. His words are, "My big takeaway from the election for county executive, which he was just elected for, was to always focus on people," said Josh. "Government focuses too much on bureaucracy and people get lost in it all. I want to inform this board," and end of quote, I'm sorry, end of the quote. "I want to inform the board that the infrastructure received over 500 signatures in favor of this. Let's end this bureaucracy. These people are people that are going to support our restaurants, go out on the town a little bit, mostly going for weekend drives. They're not going to be driving where the gravel trucks go. These are people that just want to get around the county and not in the main mega district in downtown Wausau. They just want to get around. Right now, agriculture license lets all of these vehicles go all over. It's not like we're opening up something new. We have bicycles, we have Amish buggies. 500 some people asking you to get something done once is where it's time to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Well, I will, Supervisor Krause, go ahead.
Yes, people are interested in having fun and recreation and so on, and oftentimes they don't think about the possible dangers. But I know there has been in the news where people have run into the Amish buggies, where, you know, children are outside and they get injured. And I'm thinking we need to think in terms of safety. And if they're on the roads and there's traffic at night, it's hard to see sometimes. And as one person had mentioned, that when they slow down, their brake lights are not on. So they can be slowing down to all of a sudden or gradually even. And that would put trucks and other vehicles that are going 40, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour in putting those vehicles in harm's way. So I think it's a good idea to look into this a little bit better because, lives are important and we want to make sure everybody's safe. Thank you.
Here we have Supervisor Dickinson.
So in reference to the motion to send this to public safety, we did spend 4 or 5 months having discussion. We looked at ATV data from the state going back several years, including the crash data. We took public comment. We had the 500 signatures of those who came in and dedicated their time at each meeting to speak to us about their concerns. There were more signatures that were submitted in another meeting, probably pushing those signatures over 1,000. We listened to the Sheriff's Department. We spoke with the county administrator. We spoke with the highway commissioner. We looked over policy and all of these concerns. We did look at safety. We reviewed the average daily traffic maps, 750, 1,000, 1,250, 1,500. We discussed opening all roads. We discussed curves, hills, cost of signage, local township policies, and more. We also surveyed other counties. We had 28, 9, 37, 46 counties that responded out of the 72 telling us what they do. 9 counties are fully open, 28 are some to most of the county roads are open, and 9 have no roads open. So I do believe that we did our diligence as an infrastructure committee where we got to a point where we were unanimous to bring this to the county board. So I would not support sending it to public safety. Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Supervisor Dickinson, it's time to pass this. We fought with this for years. And we want to get rid of this here, opening up a couple of miles, and it costs people $100 to get a couple of miles of road open. We want some consistency. That's what we're looking for. People want to be able to, on these county roads, they're not going to travel. There's people that live on these county roads that want to be able to get their machines out and get onto the town roads, but they're just sort of landlocked because of this ordinance and the way it sits. And it's just time. Our township and town of Ringo, we've been open. We've had 0 problems out there, and it's time to go. Thank you.
The one comment that I would make, though, is, and I don't disagree that several towns, and including my town, has opened all the town roads to ATVs and UTVs. However, there's not a single town road that I know of that's got a vehicle traffic count of 1,500 vehicles. That's a significant difference. And so I do have real concerns about opening up. When you look at the map on the 1,500 vehicle count, traffic count, and you look at highways that are going to be potentially open to UTV and ATVs, there is significant traffic on Highway N west of 107. Now, anybody knows anything about the demographics of Marathon County knows that there is significant gravel pits on 107, rotten granite, and there is multiple granite trucks that are using that highway, Highway 107 to Highway N, east and west. Now, east is closed according to the map, but west is not. And so my real concern is that we're opening up these roads, county roads, to traffic where I've had trucking companies tell me that it's a very huge concern having UTVs out there at 10 o'clock at night during tonight when there might not be any very little light. And so the only thing that you have is the brake lights on a UTV. I've driven UTVs for multiple years, and I'll be the first to tell you that I can slow down from going 45 to my driveway without touching the brake if I know that a driveway is coming up. And so the brake lights will not come on. They will not come on. It will not notify that vehicle behind me that's traveling at 60 miles an hour or 55 miles an hour that my UTV is slowing down. And I just think that we need to actually have public safety weigh in on this. And if the public safety comes up with the same conclusion that infrastructure has, then that's fine. Then we can bring it to the full board. But they have not weighed in on this. The sheriff has, and the sheriff is against it, at least at the current levels that you've opened up the roads at and in this proposal. So I, for one, will support moving it to public safety to at least have their input. Is there's any reason why there needs to be rushed? I don't believe so. I think we want to, as our vision statement says, be the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous county in the state of Wisconsin. Now, if we're going to be taking and opening up roads that potentially are going to put citizens in danger, and I don't disagree with my colleagues, there is dangers on these roads. We do have horse and buggy that have had multiple occasions of crashes, and now, on the same token, it's their livelihood. That's their commute. That's their only source of commuting. This is for entertainment and for enjoyment. I think we need to study this and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the citizens of Marathon County. And if it is the right thing, then I have no problem with it. But I don't believe that we've had the Public Safety Committee weigh in on all of the issues that are in there in this current ordinance. Supervisor Lamont and Supervisor Zhang will be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A UTV would still have a tail light, but not the brake light. I understand that. But what time are these trucks actually driving at night? Are there any rules on them driving?
On dump trucks? No.
Yeah.
They're allowed to drive anytime they want.
But when are they typically?
Most of the time, it's during their hours of operations, which are usually 8 in the morning, 7 in the morning, till 5 at night.
That's what I was thinking.
Semis, they're all hours of the night.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my gratitude to you all for sharing the information, the background information that you expressed. I was going to vote in support of this, but due to the information that was provided by you, I will be voting in support to refer this back to the public safety. I feel that this needs to be run through by the public safety to get their input prior to this coming back to the full county board. So I'll be voting in favor of referring this back to the Public Safety Committee. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Dickinson, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A note on the truckers. The ATV clubs that came here have multiple truck drivers who are in their club, and we have a fleet. There actually is a truck fleet owner, and they are for this. So they contradict in that regard. I mean, you're going to have some for, you're going to have some against. So it's not all truckers who are for, who are against this. Dave Plank, who was one member, sent an email to Infrastructure Committee, some of the Infrastructure Committee members, and he did mention a couple things about Sheriff Parks's comment on the meeting on October 7th, which actually wasn't a meeting because we ended up having a problem with the phone number. But Sheriff Parks actually did speak at the beginning of the meeting, and he made some comments. And so Mr. Plank sent an email in response to that. So one, there isn't a blanket opening of the roads. There are some segments that are over that 1,500 that are going to be closed for the time being and will be up for review. So you could get a segment like N that could be reviewed at some point and closed down. And there was no interest from the groups to open up every road. Actually, in the discussion, it was brought up, what if we open every road? And we spoke at length about looking at those ADTs, about where we could find a compromise. So additionally, the lighting, ATVs and UTVs, these are Mr. Plank's words, ATV and UTVs are more visible than many or most motorcycles. ATV and UTVs are far more visible than any bicycle or pedestrian. Counties all around us are open during dark hours with little to no issues, and they run the same ATV and UTV as us. Since 2016, there have only been 4 fatalities in the state of Wisconsin with a collision of an ATV, UTV with another vehicle, not another ATV or UTV, but another vehicle. 4 since 2016. So it's not happening, there isn't a great risk there. What Mr. Plank also did mention in his statement was in the event you are not comfortable with the single taillight of an ATV, he would be in agreement with mandating reflective tape across the rear fenders of ATVs, that would be some way that you can go ahead and see them more visibly. I know when I'm driving my vehicle, I don't always hit the brakes myself when I'm slowing down, when I'm coming up into a speed zone. So, you know, we can argue that back and forth. Ultimately, when you look at all I understand going to public safety. It's a thought, but we didn't go to public safety when we were talking about our edge line rumble strips or our center line rumble strips or all the other safety plans that we were going to put in place going forward in the county and how we were going to work on the roads. So why would we do it in one case and not another would be a question. So I'll just talk about some statistics here just to finish that up. From 2016 to 2021, there are an average of 29 fatalities due to ATV, UTV. Those are in between 16 and 28 counties. Marathon has had 4. That's less than 1 per year, 2% of that total. 30% of them are collisions, 50% are rollovers, 14% are ejection, 8%, only 2 were in that time frame, were with another vehicle. Between 2 and 4. My apologies on that. 61% are on public roads, and what they identified is that it's speed around a turn, and then it's someone themselves putting their wheels on the gravel and on the asphalt. So it's an individual's own decision. It isn't with another vehicle. There's 440,000 ATVs and UTVs in the state, and we're talking about 29 fatalities a year. You can't stop people from doing something on the road with their vehicle or ATV. I don't think there's that same kind of concern when it comes to other vehicles that it would need us to go to public safety. Thank you.
Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not a new issue we've been dealing with in infrastructure. I think from day one, 3.5 years ago when I was put on infrastructure, hardly a month goes by when we don't talk about ATV, UTV use and the need to expand connectivity and to, provide a better riding experience for those who enjoy it. And there's a lot of folks that do. It is relatively recent when we decided let's just create a map and make it standard rather than meeting every month and taking up the highway commissioner's time to reevaluate a half-mile section here and a quarter-mile section there. Let's come up with a comprehensive plan on how to do this. Now, I'm not going to say there won't be increased risk. Life comes with risk. It really does. But keep in mind, there's also a mechanism for yearly review on this. And, we might want to even look at giving townships the ability, if they don't want the county highway open in their township, they could contact the highway commissioner and request a review. I think there are mechanisms to adjust. But this is not something new. This is something we've been talking about literally for years. So I don't feel it's rushed. I don't think, as the representatives of the various clubs have told us, nobody wants to ride up and down the county highway. That's not any fun. They're just merely a mechanism to connect between trails and other township roads, which are less traveled. And that's where they want to get to. This is just a means to allow them to get in between where they want to be. So I'm in favor of passing it, not moving it back or over to public safety, because I think we can at times have a little paralysis by analysis. There's going to be increased risk. The folks who ride ATVs are willing to accept that. We have an ability to review it. And I don't think that the risk is going to be all that high because, as the folks who do it said, we don't want to ride on the county roads for miles and miles. We want to use it to get from here to there. So that's the point of this. And it's not so we're going to have ATVs and UTVs running up and down the county roads. Because believe me, I wasn't always in this position either, or I didn't always hold this position, but I do now, after listening to a lot of testimony from folks and a lot of, just plain logical ideas on what they want the access for. So I would support voting on this tonight and not moving it to the Public Safety Committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have Supervisor Harris next.
Thank you, Chairman. So on this particular issue, just wanted to get some clarification on, has there been any discussion with regards to the timing being different for different times of the year, being a different in terms of maybe later in terms of you're looking at a 9 or 10 during summer hours when sunset is later, and it being earlier as of now, where sunset is much earlier in terms of safety reasons. And if that discussion is taking place, so I'd like to hear from someone in terms of why they decided to set it at just at this set time for the whole year round. Because I think that may influence my decision on the vote. Because I really tend to side with being safer rather than sorry, and taking a more comprehensive approach and looking at each one of those things. And I realize the infrastructure has taken quite a bit of time, but I'm tending to lean towards taking another look at those issues without getting some further clarification on the timing.
Does anybody want to speak to the Chair of Infrastructure Committee? Or the Vice Chair of Infrastructure Committee want to speak to the issue the question about whether or not different timings, daylight hours versus nighttime hours, or different hours during the changing in the time during the year?
Yes, this is Supervisor Seiler, Vice Chair.
Supervisor Seiler, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. During the committee discussion, the original ordinance language had the hours till midnight. And then there was an amendment to that ordinance bringing it to 10 o'clock. So that there was discussion on the hours, and I know, again, discussion that some counties are 24/7. So the committee, the consensus, or the majority of the committee of the vote did decide to change it from 12 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So that was the decision and the discussion there.
Okay.
Originally, and I will say, excuse me, I know that I believe there was a discussion, or the original language in the original ordinance, I do believe is, or there is language for that says sunrise to sunset. And that does appear in some language, but ours, eventually the committee did decide on that 10 o'clock time. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Gomes?
Thank you again. I just want to remind people to try and understand this is a different culture thing that's starting to happen now, where people are going for a ride on Sunday afternoon with their friends. They just want to be legal and not have to worry, is this road open, or is this segment open, or this segment not? And I also want to remind my fellow board members, we have 7 individuals on the infrastructure committee, 7 people that attend meetings pretty darn well. We really looked at this very hard, and I find it very disappointing to have to be sent to another committee. Thank you.
Okay, we have Supervisor Lamont, and then Supervisor Bizzotto, and then Supervisor Robinson. Supervisor Lamont.
Mr. Chairman, I'm on the Public Safety Committee, and I feel that the Infrastructure Committee has done their due diligence, and I don't see that we would really contribute that much more to it. So I'm in favor of the motion.
Well, the one comment I would make is that the Sheriff's Department, in discussions with them, have had some concerns about enforcement and how that would take place. And so I do think that there is value by having another committee weigh in on it, but that's just my thoughts. Supervisor Bizzotto is next.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I heard you say earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the sheriff is not in support of the change. Can you talk a little more about that?
I don't have a lot of the rationale other than his real concerns about some safety issues, about opening up highways that have a 1,500 vehicle traffic count or less. There was, the Infrastructure Committee did look at, I think they produced maps with opening up highways with 500 vehicle count, with 750 vehicle count, and with 1,000 vehicle count, and with 1,250 and 1,500. They settled on the 1,500, which pretty much opens up the vast majority of the county highway system outside of the metro area. But I think that's where the concern is that the sheriff has, is the traffic count that they're opening up, and the opening up of the late hours. That's the concern that I've heard. Supervisor Robinson is next.
I'll try to clarify, and I think Supervisor Seiler got it. The current ordinance ties the hours of operation into just before sunrise and in 1 hour before sunrise and sunset. And the proposal now is 5 a.m. to 10. And I went into this somewhat skeptical, believing in the process worked well with the highway commissioner being involved in the process, setting up criteria, and then having it reviewed with input from both the sheriff's department and the recreation trails person from parks. And I voted for this coming out of committee. I'm not adverse to sending it to public safety with an expectation that they turn it around quickly. The sheriff, either in his comments that were comments that weren't comments, or in private discussions otherwise, I'll try to summarize what I've heard from him. His concerns were the disparity in speeds. One of them is, you're operating at 35 miles an hour versus 55, 60 miles an hour. With vehicles, the concerns over the differences relative to the lighting systems on the ATVs. Some have turn signals, some do not. Some have more powerful lights than others. And he expressed concerns relative to some of the trucking firms that he had heard from relative to safety issues. We picked the 1,500 vehicles per day and excluded the metropolitan planning area from eligibility in an effort to try to deal with those safety issues. I'm not adverse to sending it there with the expectation that public safety look at it quickly and bring it back.
Any other discussion?
Supervisor Boots.
We got Supervisor Boots, who hasn't weighed in yet, and we will get to, at some point, Supervisor Mask is after Supervisor Boots. Supervisor Boots.
So first of all, I'd like to just say that I know my constituents fairly well in my area, and I know they're for this. I would be voting for this. The only thing, if you do send it back to public safety, the two things I think we would look at would be the traffic counts and then the issues that the sheriff's department is looking at, things they'd like to see us take a little closer look at. That's totally up to this body if they want to send it there. Those are the two things I guess I would look at unless I'm told something different. But like I said, I do like it's already passed in our townships. We're a real rural area, obviously, where I live. So just so everyone knows that if it does go back to committee, I think it'd be just looking at those two things, traffic counts and then the sheriff's things that he would like to look at. So that was just my input. Thank you.
Okay, then we got Supervisor Mask.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've attended several of the infrastructure meetings when this has been discussed, and I think they have done their due diligence. I don't particularly see any reason why it should go to public safety. I realize there's a lot of risk involved for some people, and risk is there every day. And I recall one evening a couple of years ago coming from one of the town halls out on Highway N. I'm coming home about 9 o'clock at night, and I'm not familiar with the road, and of course there's deer. So I set my cruise on 55 so I could pay attention to the road and not worry about my speed. And I almost rear-ended a manure spreader. It was being pulled by a tractor that was narrower than it. So I didn't see the lights of the tractor. It was so full of manure, I couldn't even see the triangle. And I'll tell you what, that scared the crap out of me, literally. And I don't think going to public safety is going to make any difference. I think infrastructure's done their job. But someone did mention something about reflective tape. That stuff is amazing, and I believe that that should be a mandate that all these vehicles have it on. It just raises the visibility. Had that manure spreader been clean and I'd have seen that triangle, I wouldn't have almost hit it. So I'm not in favor of it going to public safety.
Supervisor Harris next.
All right. So after listening to discussion, I am going to vote to support that this does go back to committee because from what I've heard and listening to both sides, have issues with traffic counts, disparity in speeds. I would personally like just, again, a review in terms of the timing issues. Obviously, it was reviewed that the timing should be brought down to 10 o'clock. I think maybe even further than that, given the timing now when we look at the seasons, which is another factor in terms of the weather. The lighting system, the stopping issues, the issues that the sheriff's department have. I would also agree with Supervisor Mask in terms of maybe even adding a requirement for reflective tape. Again, the fire duty is to be the safest county. I think we should do our due diligence. Because on the other side, what we're talking about is fun, which, we want our residents to have fun and enjoy, but we also want them to be safe. So I would vote to refer that back to the committee. As you know, though, I'm not a person that likes to hold things up, so I would hope that the Public Safety Committee would move, with speed and due diligence to move this out so that people can get a vote on this and be out there as soon as possible, in a safe manner. But I will vote to refer for all the reasons that I just listed, and ask that Public Safety Committee take a look at those issues and come back to the full board with answers to those. Thank you.
Supervisor Dickinson, one last time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear about the time, so some people are aware, it's 1 hour before sunrise right now, and it's 1 hour after sunset right now. So right now we have people on the road when it's dark. The 10 o'clock, you can kind of ignore the 12 a.m. That was just one go at it. The 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. was actually to help with enforcement, to have a consistent time frame the entire year. It isn't to say that at 9 o'clock on December 31st, people are going to be ATVing when it's -10. Probably not. It could be, but it was about consistency of time from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. The 5 a.m. in the summertime, the point I was trying to make last week, is actually more rigid than it is now. People can be out on the road right now at 4:15 in the morning. So as far as enforcement and safety, having a standard time from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. actually helps with enforcement and helps with the riders knowing when they can be out. The other thing is with the traffic, that was the same reason we kind of settled on that 1,500. When you start whittling down to 1,000 or 750 or 500, and you start having less roads you can drive on, you are making it harder to enforce. Because again, the ATV drivers don't know necessarily what segment they can be on. That also increases the amount of signage that you're gonna have to put out there, because this segment is open, but that segment is not. So by going to the 1,500, we opened that up to say, look, the roads are gonna be open as much as possible. There are some places you can't go, and that would actually help enforcement by the Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Supervisor Krause.
Mr. Chair,
A point of clarification, is that 1,500 a day? Because I'm wondering about that. If they're using the roads during rush hour time, there's going to be much more traffic then, and it would be more risky. Thank you.
The 1,500 vehicle count is 1,500 vehicles that traveled across that section of road per day. Now, what is the traffic count at any particular time? Obviously, the density of traffic is going to be heavier during normal business hours than late in the evenings. But it's 1,500 vehicles that have traveled that road or less during that section of the road. The one other comment that I did hear, and I would just relay this, is that you're opening, in some cases, county highways up in townships that have not opened up their town roads. And so there, you talk about local control. Now the local control they don't have any say in whether or not their UTVs are using the county highway system when they themselves have made a conscious decision not to open their town roads on the town highways or towns at all. So this ordinance doesn't address that issue other than to say that if that highway is open and it goes through a township that's closed, they can still use the county highway system, but they can't use the town highway system.
Mr. Chair, this is Vice Chairman Quinn.
Let's see. So, Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The concern I have, I guess, is I was at the first infrastructure meeting that did happen, and I know the sheriff had made some comments about his concerns with it, which Supervisor Robinson brought up, and I don't doubt that the infrastructure did a very thorough job before they brought this resolution to the board, and I do believe in the committee process. However, if it's a safety issue, and I think running it through public safety, I believe it would go through public safety also, but I would feel more comfortable voting for this resolution if the sheriff's department signed off on it and public safety also. So I would support moving it to public safety also. Thank you.
Supervisor Krause and then Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. What I was wondering was if there's going to be roads that haven't been opened before, if there's going to be signage, additional signage needing to be put on those roads to say that they are open. Thank you.
The discussion that I had with the highway chairman was that, yes, there will be signage that is going to need to be placed up, and those roads would not be opened, any roads would not be opened until the additional signage is up. And it depends based on, I don't have the exact cost. And he did mention at the Eastern Towns Association meeting that depended on the weather and frost, they were hoping to, if it was approved, that they would get those signs up relatively quickly and maybe even all up before the end of the year, but it's going to depend on the weather and depending on when it is approved by this body, if it's approved. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 points. One, to answer your question or your query regarding townships. That is addressed with the yearly review of the township, as I mentioned earlier this evening. Could request that review and request that that county road through their township be closed. There is a mechanism for that to address that concern. And as far as signage, my recollection of our discussion was it would be much more inexpensive, much more efficient to post only the roads that are closed, since there are fewer of them. And so it would be much less costly to post around the metro area and on the segments where it's closed. And if it's not posted as being closed, then it is open. I thought that was the discussion we had. Maybe I was dyslexic in my understanding of it, but we've been talking about it for a couple of years, and I think that's where we ended up. So my understanding was that it would be open unless posted as closed. Much less costly, much clearer, and that was the discussions I believed we had in infrastructure.
We have a representative from the Highway Department, and he will provide us the information that was provided, or at least what the Highway Department chairman or Highway Department director told us, commissioner told us at Eastern Towns last Thursday.
Yeah, it would depend on which segments were open. According to that map, we have way more highways that would be open than closed. So the signage would be basically on every county and state highway coming into Marathon County. We would anticipate putting a sign up that says all county highways are open unless otherwise posted, and then post the roads in the metro area and the higher volume roads. Originally, when we looked at lower volumes, it probably would have been flip-flopped and gone the other way. But with the 1,500, most of the roads are open, so we would look at posting it at the county line when people came into Marathon County.
And not to dispute what my colleague Supervisor Johnson had mentioned, yes, it's up for review after a year and they can request, but it's a little hard to unopen the gate once the gate is opened. Any other discussion? Supervisor Harris's hand is still up. Do you request to speak again?
Yes, Chairman. I'm just make one last closing comment. And obviously, as I mentioned before, I will be supporting moving it to the committee for all the reasons that I mentioned. But I just wanted to clarify too on my position regarding the timing. I am also in favor of having set times, but I think there can be two periods of the year where there's a set time based looking at daylight savings time. I think that might be an approach, or at least I would like that to be looked at by the Public Safety Committee. But again, for all the reasons that we mentioned now and other areas being open that weren't previously opened, which would be a change, and agreeing with the chairman as well. Once you open the door to that, it's hard to sort of bring that back. I would ask that my colleagues support moving this to public safety, and again, asking that public safety though move pretty swiftly on trying to get these questions answered in a quick resolution to move forward. Thank you.
And I would invite the Corp Counsel Corp Counsel has a couple points you'd like to make.
I just wanted to clarify one point regarding the annual or biannual review by the Highway Commissioner. As the ordinances or the proposed ordinance is currently drafted, there isn't a specific mechanism for towns to petition the Highway Commissioner. The Commissioner can consider citizen input as one of the mechanisms by which the Commissioner decides to open or close segments. But that occurs during his regular biannual review, not necessarily based on a petition from a particular town. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Supervisor, this is your fourth time, so.
Oh, it's number 3, isn't it? I'm sorry, I just wanted to remind the Corp Counsel that I believe our town chairmen are still citizens of the county and they would be able to make that request. Thank you.
Supervisor Lamont, this is your fourth time, and I'm...
My third, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was going to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote has been requested. Any further discussion? Supervisor Christensen.
Yes, I just have the Corp Counsel remind us what we're going to be voting on this vote now.
I will remind everybody what you'll be voting on as soon as we're done discussing it. Is there any further discussion? Okay, the motion is to refer, right now, a yes vote refers it to public safety for their review, and a no vote says not to send it to public safety. So roll call has been requested, and again, reminding everybody, an aye is in support of moving the ordinance to review by the Public Safety Committee, a no does not. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Gaber.
Aye.
Gibbs.
Aye.
Gonnering.
Aye.
Guild. No. Gomes.
No.
Harris.
Aye.
Jacobson. Johnson. Krause.
Yes.
Lamont.
No.
Leahy.
No.
Lowe.
Yes.
Mask.
No.
McEwen.
Yes.
Oberbeck.
No.
Opal. Robinson. Rosenberg. Van Cray. Zhang.
Aye.
Arstead. Beestrom. Supervisor Beestrom. Bizotto.
Aye.
Boots.
Beestrom votes no.
Thank you. Supervisor Boots,
Aye.
Butke, Christensen, Seiler,
No.
Conway, Dickinson, Drabeck,
No.
Pfeifrick,
Yes.
Fisher. Thank you.
And the motion is carried. Okay, the motion is carried. The ayes have it, 19-13. The resolution and ordinance is referred to public safety. Moving on to resolutions. Infrastructure Committee, County Bridge and Culvert Aid, Resolution 76-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Christensen and seconded by Supervisor Butke. Any discussion on the Bridge and Culvert Aid? Resolution 76-21. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? No? Motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move to Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Item G17 says to create a 1.0 FTE Social Services Coordinator grant-funded Resolution 72-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Fisher and second by Supervisor Conway. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to create 1.0 FTE Social Services Coordinator grant-funded Resolution 72-21. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. And item 18, final resolution regarding unconditional county guarantee for its pro rata share intergovernmental agreement and taxable revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle 1 LLC project, Resolution 73-21. Motion by Supervisor Robinson and seconded by Supervisor Johnson. Any discussion? This does require a 3/4 majority vote. Supervisor Robinson.
I would ask Corporation Counsel just give us an update on some of the legal documents and discussions that have been taking place.
Absolutely. I did give the board an overview on Thursday of where we are currently. Since Thursday, there's been ongoing negotiations on some of the documents that are in your packet. I guess a reminder, the approval today, if the board were to vote to approve the resolution, is an approval of the final resolution. It's also an approval of the remaining documents, not in their current form, but in some format. The county administrator is empowered in that final resolution to approve additional changes to those documents if they're negotiated by the parties. We've already successfully added some additional protections for the county, specifically in the intergovernmental agreement that's between the counties that are involved in this bonding process. Previously, that agreement had allowed each county to have an equal vote if there was a disagreement amongst the counties. A majority vote would carry the day on those disagreements. The change that was agreed to was to change that from each county having an equal vote to having a weighted vote based on the amount of outstanding debt allocated to each county. That protects Marathon County because we have a large portion of that project debt at this time, so we would have a greater share of the vote if there was a disagreement between the counties. Additionally, the loan agreement, it did not previously require lien waivers to be included either at the time that funds were dispersed to Bug Tussle or within a certain time period of disbursement. So we've required that so that we can ensure that the property that's built as a result of this bonding would be free and clear of any liens beyond our own. We are continuing to have negotiations about an access agreement for the towers and fiber. I can tell you that we've already negotiated many changes to that access agreement today and this afternoon, and all of our suggestions have been approved, at least as to spirit, if not in the exact form. So they've been receptive to negotiations. My analysis is the same as far as protections to the county. This is, again, a large amount of indebtedness that could potentially become a risk. However, we've engaged Bug Tussle to put into place as much protection as we can in this transaction.
Supervisor Robinson.
Again, I want to thank Michael and Jerry Klein and others in administration that have been working on this. This is an important step. We were the first county to, I think, adopt the final resolution, which puts us ahead of the curve. And one of the reasons we gave the flexibility in there to give the county administrator the ability to change it. Other counties may have non-substantive but technical tweaks to this. If there are major policy changes, it will need to come back to the board. The intent is to get the parties, the authorization for is $200 million. I think the anticipation is that we'll issue debt for $78 million in round one. There may be additional phases where additional counties come in. And again, that issue is on or about December 1st of this year. And based on discussions that we've recently had with Bug Tussle, they're optimistic that they may be able to get the fiber in the ground relatively quickly. They've had good experience in Sauk County. A project that was supposed to take several weeks has been done within a month, and they have the fiber on order and available. So we're hopeful that this will go a long way in meeting the needs. The final route is yet to be determined. I know that Steve Schneider will be at the Western Towns Association meeting tomorrow, and he met last week with the Eastern Towns, and based upon comments and feedback he received from the town of Harrison and the town of Weston, made some design changes to where the fiber is going. They've significantly increased the amount of fiber that they'll be putting in the ground. So I think this is a good thing that will provide a long-term fix for those people living along the fiber route, but a short-term fix for those people that are not, that will be served with fixed wireless at a much higher capacity than what we're used to seeing in this county. So I encourage you to vote yes on this.
Just another note that Bug Tussle did have a ribbon cutting on Friday on a tower in just north of Little Chicago. And they opened up that tower and broadband service, fixed wireless to those residents. It also has a AT&T component to it, and that also is addressing a major concern in that area where there was cell coverage and lack thereof cell coverage for residents, and some of the challenges that the Frontier infrastructure was providing for people to get access to 911 and emergency services. So I too am optimistic that this is one of the first steps that we're making in moving this county and the rural residents and providing them broadband access with as minimal risk as we can afford, a minimal risk that we can obviously accept, However, there is risk. There's no question there's risk. But at the same token, the way it's structured right now, the county is putting no taxpayer dollars in this. We are providing the bonding authority and our bonding authority power, and it is not diminishing our ability to have access to bonding access for county projects. Our bonding allotment, authority levy, bonding limit is just about $600 million. And so we're in no way, shape, or form in any close to any near the capacity that the county has. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the motion, the final resolution, unconditional county guarantee for its pro rata share intergovernmental agreement and taxable revenue bond financing for Bug Tussle 1 LLC project, resolution 73-21. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. The motion is carried and it is unanimous. Thank you. And we will move on to G19, approval of the 2021 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations. This does require a 2/3 majority vote. Resolution 74-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Fisher and second by Supervisor Opel. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the 2021 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, resolution 74-21, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is carried and it is unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item H20, a resolution in opposition to proposed legislation on use of ARPA for housing. Resolution 75-21. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg and seconded by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion on the resolution?
Mr. Chair, this is Supervisor Lowe.
Supervisor Lowe, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that in my district, there's Ward 13 and Ward 14. And Ward 13 is a very heavily, a ward that is very heavily full of rental places. There's rental houses, rental duplexes, and apartments. And we needed assistance with rentals yesterday. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to vote on this. But looking at the numbers, $1 million wouldn't be enough. And so I will be voting to oppose the state legislature's resolution. So I would be voting yes for this. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a serious resolution, and what the state is trying to do is not throw people out on the street or have them homeless because of lost jobs, companies that have closed and haven't come back, people who have moved in with their parents or parents who have moved in with their children, or people who have moved in with friends or neighbors because they cannot pay their rent or their mortgage. There are 68,000 homeless people in the state of Wisconsin. In Wausau, we have people living under the bridges. We have people who don't get into shelters because there's so many people that are applying and they can only assist a few. And some of the shelters are just during the winter. We don't have a lot of shelters in Wausau. And I'm concerned because I am one of the recipients who has been on HUD housing for the past 25 years in Wausau. I couldn't get it in Cleveland, Ohio, because there was a waiting list for low-income housing of 8 years. Here in Wausau, when I applied for HUD housing, as well as a lot of people who are disabled, working part-time, just low income, they have children, and they can't support themselves on whatever income they have, if any. It took me 3 years to get into Cannonburg Plaza, or Cannonburg Apartments on Merrill Avenue. And I know that the waiting lists for HUD housing here in Wausau on the 500 building, that they've closed the waiting lists at times, because if it gets past 2 or 3 years, they close the waiting lists. And I'm concerned that, a lot of housing has gone up in Wausau here, that the rents are $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, because they're thinking that a lot of outside people with high credentials and education are going to be moving into Wausau for the jobs. I don't know where they are, those high-paying jobs. I don't know how full those expensive apartments are, but I don't see too many low-income apartments going up in Wausau. And people are hurting now. They're unemployed, or, their unemployment ran out. I've been in that position. I've been homeless 3 or 4 times. I've had the Quakers let me in. I've had the Catholics let me in. Not in Wausau, because I got housing in Wausau, because I'm low income, disabled, elderly. So I think this is an important issue. And unless you want people on the street corners selling cocaine and heroin and meth to pay their rent, unless you have women walking the streets like they have in the cities so they can pay their high-priced rent, I think you need to look at this. I think you need to not avoid the areas that are, let's say, under average in the Wausau area. You don't want to see those areas. I lived in housing. The second house I lived in Wausau, because I preferred a duplex to an apartment, had 85% leaded paint. Some of these low-income houses are pretty bad. I've had sewer backups several times in the basement. I've had pipes break in the roof. I've had furnaces stop working. So I've had streams of water in the basements. So I would say that we need to invest in this community for the low income. And I think you've heard from some of the reports from United Way about how many people are low income in this area, how many people are hurting. I mean, how much does the government have to hand out food stamps to people because their wages are only $7.50 an hour or $10 an hour? And I think this is the time that it's a real serious issue. Nobody likes to be homeless. It's very traumatic and it's very scary. And probably some of you have never been homeless, but I do know that Marathon County, for its employees, has had days where they have had, I don't know if you call them conferences or whatever, but they had a homeless day where the employees slept on the floor. I think that was all day. They slept on, or overnight, something like that. And this was several years ago. So I guess that's all I want to say. Thank you.
A couple of things. First off, I'm going to support the opposition of this legislation. Not that I want to not look at the issue about housing. It is about whether or not Marathon County is going to be directed by the state as to what amount of dollars we have to spend and are required to spend for housing. We may find ultimately that we need to spend more than the 10% or $1 million. but that's our decision, and our decision should be made by our people. And that's why this board has authorized money to be used to do a housing study in this county, is to understand the scope and depth of the problem and the issues. So I still support opposing this legislation, but only for the reasons that I stated. Supervisor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Start off by saying I also support this resolution in opposition to proposed legislation, use of ARPA for housing, the way in which the legislature has put it forward. Now, many of you may remember the last meeting, I did have questions about that. My questions were to ensure that we make sure that we make it a focus in terms of affordable housing. I represent District 3. There is a lack of affordable housing. I think there's a lack of affordable housing in most places. So it definitely needs to be a focus. And I actually want to see more than a commitment or projects, more than the limitation that the state legislature will put on it. I think my pause had been only that I wanted to make sure that we highlight the fact that the need is great, and that we could possibly offer something to show how we would use the funds. However, given the pace at which that the legislature is moving, we may not have another opportunity to make our voice heard on this. So I ask that our colleagues also support moving forward and opposing this resolution, because I do think that we could make a decision in terms of how better to use the funds, and hopefully use more funds to focus on that area that is so desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Supervisor Bizzotto.
Supervisor Johnson's next, and then Supervisor Bizzotto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to state that I agree. I believe we can make those decisions for ourselves. We do not need the legislature in Madison dictating the exact terms. And also, I'd like to point out this is yet another time that we're telling the body in Madison of our wishes. So I support the resolution. I don't think they should be dictating how federal funds that are granted to us are spent. I think they're out of line. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Bizzotto is next.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I had initially read this resolution to mean that what would be dictated is that at least 1 million or 10% of ARPA funds be spent. And now, after hearing the discussion and looking at it more closely, it looks like it's limiting the county to spending at most $1 million or 10% on housing. Could you either confirm that that interpretation is correct, or direct corporate counsel to do so, please?
The interpretation that in consulting Corp Counsel is, it is saying that you must spend a minimum of 1 million or 10%, whichever is the lesser of. So at least it has to be spent. So you can spend more according to this legislation, but you will spend at least 1 million or 10%, whatever is the lesser of the two numbers. Does that clarify it for you?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Any other discussion? Supervisor Krause.
Yes, I was wondering, I had brought up at one of the hearings about the need for public transportation and shelters. We are getting 5 new bus shelters, and they're, I think, about $6,000 each. But a city this size...
Supervisor Krause, that's not germane to the discussion. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to rule your comments out of order. We have to talk about the item that is on the floor, which is the resolution in opposition of legislation and the use of ARPA fund housing. I'm sorry.
Right.
Any other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, the resolution in opposition to the proposed legislation on the use of ARPA for housing, Resolution 75-21. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
The motion is carried, but it is not unanimous. We will move on to miscellaneous business. Item H, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements and/or requests? A couple of announcements from the chair. We do have Western Towns Association this Thursday at 7 o'clock in the town of Reed Brock. Also, the clerk has asked me to announce that we need signatures from Infrastructure and HR Finance. Any other announcements? Supervisor Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to take this opportunity to congratulate Team USA at the World Curling Championships in Beijing going on right now, skipped by Marathon County's own Matthew Toombs. And it's Paralympics World Championships. And the skip of the Team USA is Matt Toombs from the Wausau Curling Club. And they are currently in second place. The event is ongoing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that update. Supervisor Zhang. Supervisor Zhang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, go ahead. I think you turned yourself back on mute. Go ahead. Supervisor Zhang, we lost you. Go ahead. Supervisor Zhang, you're broken up. I'm sorry. We can't understand you. Can you try again?
Can you hear? Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's still broken. Go ahead, try.
Testing, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I just want to use this opportunity to invite everybody to join the Hmong American Center on the 13th and 20th. The 13th is the grand opening of our building. Due to some renovation, it's at 11 to 2. And then at the 11 to 1, or 11 to 2, I'm sorry. And then on November 20th is the grand opening for Jim and Marty Harris's museum at the Jefferson Stand. Any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to announce that the EPA, as of August 21st, has banned all uses of chlorpyrifos, and that's a herbicide which is being put on plants, our food, by farmers, and it's used by gardeners as a pesticide. It has had numerous lawsuits against it and by people who have been struck with cancer. So farm workers and people around the areas, it's traveled by the wind, and it destroys the butterflies and bees, which through pollination provides 75%
Supervisor Krause,
of
your
our
time
food.
is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
Mr. Chair, this is Vice Chair McEwen.
Vice Chair McEwen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to let the board know that the Rules Review Committee will be meeting again this Thursday, the 28th at 8 a.m. at the courthouse. So you're all invited. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Seeing none, we are down to item 22. What is your pleasure? We have Supervisor Opel with the motion to adjourn, and we have Supervisor Jacobson with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Say no. We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah.